An event series that we host on a regular basis to really, one, talk about issues that are here in our community, raise awareness about homelessness, poverty, and also talk about where technology fits in. So thank you very much for taking time out of your evenings to join us tonight. I'm especially excited because we have an amazing lineup of panelists here that are just on the front lines of working with people experiencing homelessness, and again, where technology fits into that. So before we get started and I introduce the panelists up here, just a couple questions. So how many people in this room spoke to someone in their family in the past 24 hours on their cell phone? It's a lot of people. Or via text, or email. We're really in touch with our families, it's great. So let's just imagine that you didn't have a cell phone or a laptop. So how would you get in contact with your family?
Write a letter.
Write a letter? Yeah, it's not rhetorical, I'm actually curious. And even just thinking about, say, in the city right now, we know a lot of people are facing evictions. So if you were forced out of your apartment tomorrow, where would you charge your cell phone? That's a tough one. And actually, there's chargers on certain unis. Keep that in mind. I just wanted to ask that question and just really think about how often we use access to technology, communications, whether you have a smartphone or a feature phone. It's hard. We take these things for granted. We have these things in our life every day. And you think about the new iPhone or MacBook, and it's like luxury products, but we forget that the basis of these products is very much a basic need in today's age. And so that's what this conversation is about today. And so I'm very excited to have Jen Padgett with Community Technology Alliance, as well as Julie Berlin with St. Anthony Foundation, who also manages the Tenderloin Tech Lab, and Kristin, Keller with Compass Family Services, who also was testing programs with NeighborNest, which is the new technology lab backed by Twitter. So welcome, thank you for taking the time to be on the panel. So first, I want to give you all a chance to say just a little bit more about yourselves, what you're focused on, kind of the work that you do, and your background, if you want to dive into that. So Kristin, please.
Sure. So I'm Kristin, and I am currently the Assistant Program Director of Compass Family Services Family Resource Center. So we primarily work with families, either homeless, at risk of homelessness, who are generally on the wait list to get into shelter in San Francisco, which right now is about, for a 3 to 6 month shelter stay, it takes about 8 to 10 months to actually get into shelter, because there is no capacity really for families in shelter right now. So we provide comprehensive services to families in support of connecting them to housing resources, connecting them to employment, education, transitional housing programs, other kind of housing alternatives, subsidies, things of that nature. But employment and education has become a really big part of what we do, as well as connecting families to childcare. Most recently, we have partnered kind of with Twitter around their NeighborNest, which is a kind of a comprehensive technology center where Twitter staff will support, I think, families and individuals in the Tenderloin more broadly, but we're their first community partner, and we'll be providing, I think, starting off about 15 hours of programming a week at this NeighborNest in support of just providing our clients with access to technologies that they don't generally have. And that can be in support of really any goals. So in addition to housing, it might be childcare search, applying for benefits, identifying services and resources in the community, schools, after-school stuff, summer school, so kind of family-centered, but to meet all of their needs.
I'm Julie Berlin. I manage the Tenderloin Tech Lab at St. Anthony Foundation. Today is the 1-year anniversary of when I joined St. Anthony's and the Tech Lab. Just coincidentally. And so St. Anthony's, you might be familiar with. It's been around the city for 64 years. Mostly it's known for serving about 2,500 meals a day to the poor and homeless of San Francisco. We are in the Tenderloin at Golden Gate and Jones, right there. The Tech Lab started in about 2008. From what I understand, was a room with a couple of computers and some people who were helping other people learn a little bit about computers as they came online and also get jobs. We are now a 50 computer center with 4 distinct learning spaces. We have workshops, we have 3-week classes, beginner and intermediate, and we have drop-in capacity in our lab, which is the most popular choice presently because people are wanting to get in there to access technology, get online to support their housing search, employment, connect with family and friends, and just create income streams. So we're on the 3rd floor of a pretty new building. Any of you who would like a tour, I'd be happy to show you around so you can see what does it look like for a technology center in the Tenderloin. So my background's in education. I come from a family of educators. I have taught every age a lot of different topics, and so the strength that I bring to the Tech Lab is less about tech and much more about learning and education, which because we are an adult-focused learning center is incredibly important, just as you wish to be lifelong learners and very nimble in your life and careers. So everybody who comes into the Tech Lab, which is about 100 people a day, want to have flexibility, fluidity, and success in their life, and that includes access to the technology that we're able to give in the Tech Lab.
Hi everybody, I'm Jen Padgett from Community Technology Alliance, and we're in the South Bay in San Jose. And we're focused a lot in that area, but we do work across the Bay Area and actually across the United States doing some technical assistance. Our projects mainly surround information systems and telecommunications. Our organization was founded 24 years ago by a homeless task force down in the South Bay who identified the need to have a technology partner to work alongside the homeless service organizations and really build expertise in that area. So everything that we do is in support of an identified need by the service providers that we work with. One of the projects that we're working on currently is the Mobile for All project, which is a smartphone plan that caters directly to low income and homeless individuals. And that's been going on for about a year and a half now. When we first started the launch of it, we've really been massaging the program over the course of that time and adding applications to help homeless navigate services, navigate their smartphone, and one of the things that we're working on is getting our homeless population banked so that they can actually pay for the services that we provide and other services that they may need to pay for. So those are some of the things that we're working on now. You can go to ctagroup.org if you want to find out a little bit more information about our history and what we do. So it's a pleasure to be here. And Matt Fowler actually is here, and he's one of our partners. He runs the Mobile for All project with us, and they provide the service behind us. So thanks for coming.
Great. So I've been thinking about mobile, and definitely with the rise of mobile technologies, what's interesting, and just one stat that I found, people that are making around $30,000 a year, which is basically under the poverty line, just above the poverty line, almost half of those people are accessing the internet on their cell phone. And an article I read with Tenderloin Tech Lab is about 40-45% of people have a cell phone coming through the tech lab. Does that sound about right?
I'd love to update that information. I just did a survey
Really?
last week and this week.
Is it higher?
It's lower.
It's lower.
So,
Interesting.
when that research was done, the concept of cell phone wasn't broken down into cell phones with internet service and cell phones with no internet service.
Okay.
And so what I asked, and what I learned from my questions was that 70% of the people who the tech lab users who responded to my survey either have no device, that's 20%, or a device with no internet access. So that means there's 30% who have a device of some kind, which isn't necessarily a cell phone.
Right.
So that means that in order to access internet, these tech lab users are coming into the tech lab or possibly in the future to the Nest. But we're only open limited times. They don't have 24-hour access like you do. They are absolutely reliant on community computer center such as the tech lab or the library, which is very limited, and other limited resources. So it's lower actually.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I think it's really important to note that. And I'm so excited to hear about your program for what is it, devices for all?
Mobile for all.
Mobile for all, because this is the thing on my sheet, the largest letters that's underlined, that's the biggest, is access and service for all. So that'll be a theme that you'll be hearing me chirp on quite a lot today. Access and service for all.
Yeah, that is some really interesting numbers.
Now that's not necessarily, that is about the technology lab users who answered this survey last week.
Yeah.
I would say that sounds pretty consistent with where our clients are. A lot of our clients have free cell phones through like Assurance or other sort of Lifeline, which is like a government program. You can actually access free phones, but often they are phones without internet access. And not only that, they're also limited in terms of the amount of minutes you get. And we actually have stationary phones in our Family Resource Center that clients come in to use, and we do frequently see families come in to make phone calls for basically any need that you might have throughout your day, coordinating, with other family members, picking kids up at school, calling your kids' school if you're running late. We'll have families who actually stop in and use our phones for all of those reasons, in addition to calling potential employers, following up with housing applications. So it's a pretty common need, definitely, that we see.
Yeah, of all the needs that you see people coming in to either access the internet or communications, phones, what tends to be kind of the top 3 needs, or the top 3 things that people are utilizing the labs for communications?
I don't know if there's necessarily 3. I would say for the most part, it's literally accessing and coordinating resources. So that could be calling to follow up with housing or working on housing applications. That could be following up with service providers. For example, to stay on our shelter wait list, you're required to call us once a week to check in and let us know that you still want to remain on our wait list. So you need to have a phone or phone access to do that, unless you're available to come in person during our drop-in hours. So really just everyday resources would be kind of the main thing. Another thing I was actually mentioning earlier to Julie is that one thing we see a lot with our younger clients who are more tech savvy, who may have found ways to get or save up for a smartphone, is that they're actually using their smartphones with internet. They'll come in and use our free Wi-Fi to complete applications for things that I don't think any of us would ever think of using a smartphone for, like a 25-page housing application. They're literally doing things that we really take for granted we do on the computer on a daily basis. They're doing those things on cell phones, and it's pretty, delicate, sensitive applications that are really important. So there is a pretty big range of, I think, what we're seeing families do. But for the most part, at the end of the day, it's coordinating where your kids are, who you need to be in touch with to ensure that you are connected to whatever housing resources or other services you need to access in times of need. which generally requires a lot of coordination in and of itself. If you need to get a referral to go to St. Anthony's for clothing, or get in touch with your case manager for a resource, for food if you have an immediate food need. So it's a lot of basic needs access.
Yeah. So just for my knowledge and for the room, these housing applications, these service applications, are they available on paper, or have they moved to the digital world?
A lot of these things are still available on paper, but it's usually not paper you're filling out. So, for example, if you wanted to apply for food stamps, you can go to 170 Otis and get a number and wait in line and do an application there. It's pretty time intensive. You have to be able to get there again during their open hours. But if you have access to a computer, you can complete a really quick 5-minute, 10-minute application, submit it, and it's just an expedited process. And that is kind of thanks to a lot of the tech innovators in the industry who are working to create solutions for families experiencing homelessness and other economic hardships.
Yeah.
We have one phone that gets used pretty much constantly, and we have the 50 computers, so it's hard for me to. Would be hard for me to say telephones are used more than computers, just because. But when I asked everybody in the survey, and we were also talking about this before for right now, that about a third of everybody said. Sorry, there were 3 top things that they're using technology to access, or that are most impactful in their lives. One is connection with family and friends. No surprise, that's true for most of us in the room, I would probably say. Income, meaning job search or employment improvement. So they might be working part-time or a temporary gig or at a low wage, and they want to upgrade. And the third one is housing, or finding a safe sleeping place.
Yeah, and since we're in information technology and we're running homeless management information systems for a lot of counties, one of the things we did was study that information. We've studied that information, of course, over the course of the last 10 years. But family relations is actually, when we look at measures of self-sufficiency and what was connected most to keeping somebody housed, it was a family relations score that was higher. So that is one of the things that people are using the connections for. We've known that all along as well, because before the Mobile for All, we ran a community voicemail program for 20 years, which gave everybody a voicemail box for the same purposes. This was just the rethink of that and bringing it into, the modern technology that that folks are utilizing. So we do follow along with the same statistics. We're a little bit higher at like the 40-45% where people have had smartphones of the people that we surveyed, but I think it's that number is going to be naturally higher in Silicon Valley than in other parts of the country too. So that's something to consider about that smartphone technology.
Yeah, the voicemail is really interesting because so much I read and often we hear from our community, looking for a job, but they don't have a phone number where people can leave messages. That's how would you respond to a job opportunity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly it. Through the voicemail program, it was keeping them connected to one number. So that's what we wanted to provide too. With the Mobile for All project, was a safety net service behind that to keep voicemail on, to keep them connected even if there were troubles paying. So that's one of the things that got worked out with Better World Wireless to help us and keep them connected.
Yeah. I just hearing kind of the stats of people staying housed and staying connected to their family and staying connected to their family is one of the just number one reasons that you can access communications. On Hangouts, we often see that the words of support that donors are sending are really giving people this motivation and this kind of mini cheer squad, this greater network of support, and it's just so important to have that connection, whether it's a text message or a voicemail box that that you called. I was thinking about, so the tech lab's been around since 2008, and then the Nest brand new.
Brand new, we just had the ribbon cutting last Wednesday.
I was thinking about, prior to these tech labs, where did people go? The library is obviously one huge community resource, but other than the library, what are the options in a city like San Francisco?
There are, the library's kind of been a big one, and this is kind of a specific side note for families that when we started using the Nest, we did surveys with the families there. One of the biggest things they commented on was how safe and secure they felt at the Nest. The number one reason for that was that we provide childcare. So any parents that come in, they can immediately connect their child to childcare. There's a glass window between the computer lab and the childcare area, and so they can see their child if they need to check in. But one thing that a lot of parents mentioned is that there are a lot of technology centers throughout the community that you can access if you're in need of, let's say, employment, for example. But oftentimes they don't have childcare, or it's not really appropriate to bring your children. If you go to the library, it's okay to bring your kids, but a lot of parents commented that they really don't feel safe. At least in the main library, that safety is a really significant issue for a parent when you've got small children. So that was a pretty big need. But there are tech centers throughout the community. For example, the Office of Economic and Workforce Development in San Francisco has neighborhood access points, which are basically tech centers with computers. But you come in, you become a member, and they're really geared primarily toward employment for the most part, which is definitely relevant for a lot of our families. But the main need usually is getting childcare first, then dealing with all the other barriers for actually preventing the employment.
Yeah.
So that's a tangent, but
And I think also homeless shelters and service providers are a big place for access to phones for sure. Sometimes there's a computer lab along with it, and then if someone's lucky enough to have a smartphone, then sitting outside a Starbucks or a coffee shop is another typical way to access Wi-Fi for free. So those are some of the things we've heard.
Yeah.
one other thing I think that came up a lot when we were talking specifically to parents is that a lot of our older parents, like I was saying, a lot of the young folks are very tech savvy and they just don't have the financial resources to get the technology they need, computers in particular. But a lot of the older parents aren't tech savvy. A lot of them really aren't computer literate. They're really unfamiliar with the basic programs like Microsoft programs, or they might not have email. Email might still seem kind of new and scary, and so a huge part of what they're looking for is someone to really teach them how to use really, really basic technologies so that they can begin to meet basic needs, like doing a child care search, like finding resources online, like connecting to employers via email or completing online applications. Those are things a lot of people want to do, and they see the need for that, and they just need really some coaching and support, whether one-on-one or in a group, to do that. And I think there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of stigma on the one hand, and I think a lot of people are kind of, there's definitely some shame there about not knowing, not having access in the first place. So being able to provide the right types of support around access to technologies and communication technologies, but also really coaching around just kind of the basics, how to use technology. Because another thing that a lot of our families see is a connection to, once they are able to conduct a child care search online, or apply to some benefits online, or apply to a job online, those are then skills that they can actually add to their resume that will, not only help them become more tech savvy, but will also make them more job ready.
Yeah, and both tech labs have a lot of programming around education and skills, and you mentioned if you have just the basics, searching online, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And what are some of the other programs that you're running in terms of teaching tech skills that seem to be a big need?
Well, so at St. Anthony's, the basic, the first day of the basic computer skills class is like petting zoo. It's not in front of the monitors, it's on a table and it's a mouse and it's a keyboard. I mean, we're talking absolute basic, and if you fiddle with it, it's not gonna like explode the world. So there's some real fear behind interacting with the hardware of technology. So we get rid of that on the first day. And then we have 2-hour classes 4 days a week for 3 weeks. And most people take the class 2 or 3 times. So it's repetition and lots of opportunities to practice. And we have tutoring on Fridays. So we have Zendesk tutors and Twitter tutors, and other people from the community who come and work one-on-one, so that whatever Jen needs to pay attention to, whether it's applying online or to a job or just setting up a Gmail account or whatever, she can get that assistance. Somebody else might want to do homework from the class they're taking. Somebody else might have dropped the class because they're working part-time and it didn't quite work, but they still want to learn, so they're coming in and looking over the handouts with the tutor. So and then we also have an ongoing survey questionnaire at the front desk, just asking people to hand tabulate what are they interested in taking in terms of workshops. And we're running workshops between those 3-week classes, little 2-hour one-offs. And today we did Google Docs. How to make a flyer is another day. Just some basics that are actually rooted in the needs of the learner. So very task-based, very oriented to what they would like to accomplish. And we get signups and not everybody makes it, but we just keep offering it. Part of I think what draws people to the Tenderloin Tech Lab, even though it's in a very unsafe neighborhood, when you get in there, it feels great. It's a very harmonious space. It has a very nice feeling. And part of the comfort level there, and we get a lot of feedback about how comfortable the guests feel there, is I think one of the things that positively impacts that is that we're steadily, lovingly from the guest generated ideas and completely focused on who we're serving. We just keep doing it, and we're just going to keep doing it, and it's going to look different from year to year. And that's sort of like the slow motion version of the cheerleader coach. That is it, to just show up and continue to be doing this. So it's a very interesting paradox with speed and technology, and also slowing down and listening and being receptive and open to influence, and not thinking we have the answers, or that the newest tech thing is so cool and we must get this to our guests, and meanwhile they don't even have a phone. They don't have a device, or they don't have the cognitive backdrop for just sort of a place to park that. Or maybe they do and they're raring to go, and we don't have a high-level class yet for them. So that's when the tutoring is really great, because it can impact many different people with many different needs and many different sort of states and of learning and ability to remember things.
Have you seen asks and needs or skills evolve since 2008, since the beginning, or has it stayed the same in terms of?
Well, I've only been there for the year, but so what I could say is that I guess 3 years ago we launched a capital campaign at St. Anthony's, and part of it was to renovate and expand the tech lab. So at that time, there must have been some good thinking and good arguments to get that money getting raised. So I'm not sure. I'd have to give some thought to that question, I think.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know if 2008 the needs and how much they've changed, even just from what's out there, but of course based on what people have access to.
I think one thing to keep in mind as developers, if there are any tech developers in the room, is that the rate of change of interface, like for our users, for our guests, is it can be very disabling in terms of interfacing with technology. Like they just got used to how Facebook looks or how Gmail or how something looks, and now they go in one day and it's like, hey, everything's changed game, and it's completely not helpful to this. It's not helpful to me personally. Actually.
It's not helpful.
It's and so what's kind of good and sexy for some of the folk isn't always going to be true. And a great, so that's something just to keep in mind. Just saying. And many folks who are visually impaired. Okay, right now I'm visually impaired. Okay, and now I'm not. But not everybody has glasses who needs them. And so just for visual acuity and manual dexterity, the minute level of motor skill needed, and like I'm saying, dexterity to get into like touch something that has to get touched to do something super important. It can be very difficult. I was TAing in a class the other day, and I'm working with this gentleman who is in the basic class, and we are trying to create a lot of comfort, and we're trying to get this one thing touched on a touch screen. We've got these gorgeous new touch screen computers, and we are just like collectively all having a hard time doing this thing. But the teaching moment and the learning moment is, what is our attitude going to be while we're struggling with this thing that's imperfect? If it's going to be, okay, this is, you know what, I'm out of here. If a teacher says that, or a TA says that, or if we convey that attitude or energy to our learners, that's the end of comfort for that technological engagement. And instead, we minimize this is not a big deal, we'll figure this out, there's a different way to do this, let's just try that. And so we're always trying to give a demonstration of, we got this. This is just a tool, we're just getting to know it. So that's important too.
Yeah, and you touched on kind of designing for accessibility, and I know that you have some projects where it's so important, especially if the one device that may be accessible is a cell phone, then how do you design for accessibility?
Yeah, I think it's really important to consider the audience and to engage the audience to help you in the development process. One of the ways that we develop is we work with a frugal innovation lab down at Santa Clara University, which is just a mile and a half up the road from our offices. And the students there are great at developing things that are lightweight and very nimble. The last 2 years they've done a homeless hackathon. And this last year we asked them to develop apps specifically around the Mobile for All project. So when we ask our homeless population, what are your pain points, and then what are our pain points at running the program, then we came up with a list, and the basic three were a way to easily navigate the phone. So and learn the phone after they've gone through their initial training. A way to navigate and find services, and then also a way to find out how they can pay. How can they pay their bill? Because we work with service providers who sometimes pay the bill, but we have individuals who are paying a discounted rate. They get a smartphone for free, but are paying a monthly service. So the students, came up with one. Simply was the app that they came up with to navigate the phone really easily. So phone, it's just literally a button that says call, and there was a button on, checking your data, because they only get so much data. So in our training, we encourage them to go to Wi-Fi spots to utilize, and that's part of the training is don't use up all your data, within the month, and you can access it in all of these places. And so even turning that capability on and off is something that requires training, and was difficult to navigate. So something that was easily answered by an app like this, and And there were a couple of others, there were several actually designed over the course of 24 hours, which was amazing. But I think really important is to engage that audience. We also have a homeless liaison on our team. He's actually homeless right now. He helps distribute the phones at meetings or wherever we have distribution locations when we're getting a group together to train them. And he also provides customer support for the project too. So there is someone, and he's not, Chuck will tell you, like, he's not the most tech savvy guy. I mean, he can do email, but he had to learn how to navigate the phone himself, and now he's helping others, and he understands, the pain point there, and I think that's always helpful too when you can engage your audience in providing program services too.
Yeah. One of the cool apps, or I guess it's really just the mobile site, is Link SF, which was through St. Anthony's and Zendesk, and I mean, essentially it's a mobile site that has all of the resources you could possibly need. You go ahead.
So when I joined St. Anthony's last year, the foundation had just launched a mobile optimized website called Link SF. And that was the output of a collaboration between Zendesk and the Tenderloin Tech Lab and St. Anthony Foundation, and then a user experience expert. And we, based on the fact that there were sort of a critical number of Tech Lab users who did have mobile devices, and and that a lot of caregivers, social workers have devices, we determined that there are 5 essential service categories, which are food, hygiene, shelter, technology, and medical. And we worked with the Bar Association and basically used a resource book that they update every 2 years with lots of service provider information from across the city, and pulled information from their resource guide and in those 5 categories. And the engineers at Zendesk designed this up, and we tested it. They tested it, my predecessors, and it got launched, and it was fantastic. It's a beautiful site, it's super clean, not distracting. If you check it out, Link SF, you'll see it will show the viewer what's, depending on just a couple of different criteria or screens, whatever you want to call it. If something is near or far, and if it's open or closed, and if you allow it to do its to know your location, it will tell you, right now you can get to this clinic by walking 1.5 miles in that direction. It's open, and it will see you and your child. So it's very, very cool collaborative development. And it was funny because I came on right after it got developed, and I was getting contacted by lots of strangers letting me know how boring it was. And I was like, thank you very much. I did a whole bunch of research about this. This is what the people who need to use this. Thank you. Yeah, because it's like, if you are recovering from trauma, if you are addicted, or if you are living on the street, if you are any number of things that make it difficult to concentrate at any given time, you don't want all those ads and dogs and whatever spots, and you know what I'm talking about. You want it to not have that. So this allows concentration, and it's very beautiful.
The biggest issues that we have when we're developing something, and this doesn't just go, with the homeless population, but we're working with service providers who have outreach workers, or people who are, working in the shelters who we're developing technology for, and a simple workflow to navigate through to get the information that you're trying to get into a system or get out of a system always works best. And whenever we've tried to create something elaborate, then it always usually gets back down to like this bare bones, process, and that's typically what works best.
And I would push that even further. I would suggest that I want to help educate for those of you who might think of homeless people as sort of one blocked category. There are many faces of homelessness. There are chronically homeless and there are recently homeless. There are homeless who have solid work histories, and there are homeless people without a work history. There's many people who can experience the unfortunate status of homelessness. And extreme low income and homelessness they're right there next to each other, and it could be pretty solid for you. And one piece of bad luck and you are on the streets. And it can go that way for a long time. It can go down from there, it can go up from there. So one thing I want to say is that the face of homelessness is really the faces of homelessness. And the reason I want to say that is for point number 2, which is involving stakeholders in development. I would say is one of the most critical things you could possibly think of doing if you're ever thinking about, I'm going to use tech to help address poverty or homelessness. And that means having many people who have experienced homelessness and low-income lives at the table. Many, because from there you can probably get past simple into something a little bit more complex, but that is really meaningful and really responsive. So that's my plug. Thank you.
No, that is wonderful. And actually, my next question was going to be, where in the tech world, where can the tech world plug in? You're working with Twitter, working with NeighborNest, you are a tech company that's already plugged in. So, how can people plug in? It's a great point. It's really involving stakeholders. If you have any other input on that.
I would say, I think there are a couple of things that really make a difference. Number one is actually providing hungry goods. So as a company, being able to, for example, provide computers to people experiencing homelessness, that is huge. And we've had clients who've gotten a donation of a computer can be just a huge difference in what their day looks like. I mean, it's significant. One thing that Twitter just did that's been really helpful for us is we have a family shelter. Twitter just came and installed Wi-Fi. So again, for our families who have computers, that's huge. And for the clients who have smartphones or any phone that can access the internet, that's huge as well. So just a significant change in their daily reality of what they have access to and what they don't have access to. Going off of what Julie was saying about kind of people at different levels, so this is true with families as well. We have a lot of families who have really need kind of the most basic access to technology, and we have other families who, I've worked with a dad who had 25 years of experience in video game development and is really employable, and the family was just down on their luck. He got laid off. Mom got pregnant at a certain time. They just, they lost their housing. And for families that lose housing or end up, kind of starting back at step 1, it's so significant, that loss of access to resources. So even though he could navigate through any technology, what he really needs at the end of the day is just access to a computer. So I think, that just connecting people to real resources is number 1, first and foremost, the most important thing. Another one too, though, I think is actually building connections out the community. That there's a reason everyone here is here tonight, and a huge part of that is, I think, not only building an understanding kind of across the community, across the folks that we work with, the folks that you work with, and making sure that people really understand how complex this issue is. Why there are so many homeless families in San Francisco right now, and how we can actually work together to really support them. As far as families go, we know that right now in the XFUSD, basically 1 in 25 kids enrolled in our school district is technically homeless. That is huge, and I don't think that you would find that statistic in most school districts. Mm-hmm. So actually finding a way to really bridge that gap and build connections between the community is huge. One thing I know we have seen with families who, let's say, engaged in case management for a year. They've gone into shelter, they've maybe gone to a transitional housing program, they're going to City College, and they've just happened to network with a volunteer along the way who's connected them to an internship somewhere really awesome. Those types of connections are huge. And so I think that actually thinking of engaging one-on-one with these communities in terms of networking is really, really powerful. And that if we saw more of that, I think we'd have a lot more support just throughout the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about your connections and who you know and how you've gotten jobs or even found your last apartment or the place that you live, it is all about who you know. And if you're in a low income area, then you're working within a group that all have the same needs. And so really thinking about if you have a concern, that is a number one thing that you can do is provide those connections. Even hey, I'm sure you probably know like a few people who have jobs that are open or maybe even housing situations that could be accessed by someone. So those are some things to think about. I think the giving of real goods is great. I also want to add to that I think also the resources to put those goods into place. So as a technology company, we get servers, we got cell phone donations, things like that. But then really considering how a nonprofit organization is going to implement those things. It requires project management, it requires program management to put all that stuff together. So I'm really thinking strategically about the product donations you're making and having some kind of cash to back that up, I think is really helpful. And if you are participating in development, then think about if you are going to go to a hackathon or if you're going to do something, what you're going to do after that hackathon. So how are you going to carry forward and provide that technical resource that you have to the nonprofit that you're working with to make sure that they can implement that and that it actually does end up touching the folks that you developed it for, because I think we're just technologies get built so fast, but then the thoughtfulness behind how that sustains beyond the day after you develop it is something I think should be part of your consideration when you're participating in any development.
That's a big one, and I come from kind of a full-on tech developer background industry, and that was a challenge that we saw quite a bit, was things being built and passed off and maybe just not thought through in terms of how the nonprofit was going to continue managing it. So just, plus one on that. Just if you're attending a hackathon or event, just be really meaningful and thoughtful and commit to be on that weekend for that day.
I think I see fatigue in the service provider, industry, because people want to help and like I have this tech skill and I want to come in and program something for you really quick or make this work, and it's really difficult for a nonprofit to implement something like that. And so just really like what kind of commitment level can you have and can you make, and then just understand there's a little bit of weariness on the nonprofit side and accepting that help, because over the course, especially I think over the last 10 years, we've just seen all that ramp up where everybody wants to help so much, and then programs burn out, and it's a burnout for the workers if they are trying to adopt a new technology all the time. So just think about that too, I think.
And I would echo my colleagues' comments about concrete goods. Totally important. Access and service for all. Access and service for all. Excuse me. So, and that, what does access mean? It means having the thing, but it also means having the education to use it and the service to make it actually make a difference. Also, what you can do is if you don't impact hiring at your job, find out how your voice could impact those who do hire, and ask and find out what your companies are doing to create pathways to employment for people who are experiencing poverty or homelessness, and encourage the people who hire in your company, or will encourage you if you are those who hire, to choose vendors who are hiring local workers. So a lot of the big tech companies are outsourcing the very entry-level work that we would want to get our low-income people in the door at tech companies through. Wait, I got lost. The point is, there are vendors who are hiring from way outside of San Francisco and bringing in janitorial, guest housekeeping, cafeteria, maintenance, and that work is being done by not us, not our people. So there's this, when we talk about barriers to technology, this is a bit of a different framework, but there are barriers being created to getting into tech companies when a vendor is not held to task for locally hiring. So where you can influence, where you can educate, where you can simply ask influencers or decision makers. You're here because you're a leader. You're here to be educated. So I challenge you to go out and go back and lead, whatever form that takes for you. So yeah, true pathways to employment, really important. And listen, learn, and lead. St. Anthony's has a very robust social justice program. And if you're interested in coming down and finding out what it's like to live in the Tenderloin and eat at St. Anthony's and find out about the history of the Tenderloin and who lives there and why it's important to support people living there, we have really cool programming. So contact me personally and I will make sure you connect with Angie, who will welcome you or a group of folks from your company to engage in the Tenderloin with service providers and service users. We host more than 10,000 volunteers annually, and so we have a very robust program, and we'd be happy to see any of you. I wrote this sentence earlier today, and I'm going to share it with you. It's a big idea, but I think that because of the theme of tonight, I'm going to share it with you. Don't be put off. Take what you want, leave the rest. But I really feel strongly that the eradication of poverty is only going to happen across society and across lifespans. So that means start now. Start now, getting super involved in some way that works for you. And the work matters, whether it's volunteer, advocacy, creating a voice, educating people, getting people to donate, launching a cool campaign to perhaps gather all the flash drives that all you and your colleagues are getting rid of. Those have absolute use in other places. Devices that are old to you are brand new to many others. And refurbished devices and computers, laptops are very useful. They can be life-changing, as we heard. So, better start now.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna end on that. Sounds good.
Pressure.
But I'd love to open it up to questions. Folks out there, pressing, burning questions. Yeah.
So one of the topics you guys talked about was making sure the resources that homeless individuals access were just like user-friendly. One thing that Kurt talked about is like a lot of the organizations who are providing services like shelters or just and general services, their web presence really those organizations themselves aren't very tech savvy. I'm curious what kind of resources there are for service providers to make sure their web properties, whatever technology they're building, can be accessed by their users.
Well, I think there's a number of organizations that are helping with that. TechSoup is one of them that provides discounted software and things like that. Not necessarily like a web presence, but I think there's another one called Hands on Tech in the South Bay, and I think they're reaching up here in the San Francisco area that is providing regular trainings for nonprofit workers who they may not be they may not be social media savvy. So how do you properly tweet or have a presence on Facebook and things like that? So I think that and there are like tech companies that are helping out with those kinds of things. So I think there's a lot of resources out there. I think nonprofits find themselves in an under-resourced capacity so they could go to these trainings, but actually then getting funding to fund that social media person who's going to do that work is oftentimes difficult. So I think also if any of you, are funding a nonprofit, or if you're thinking about donations in that way, thinking about how you can build the capacity of the nonprofits that you're working with, and obtaining those operations and those other costs I think for-profit companies take for granted. It's I think important to consider.
I would add one more thing. It's just the idea of, I think, really keeping things simple and accessible and sustainable. So sustainability definitely becomes an issue, and I think I don't know if it's probably not so much an issue for our nonprofits, but for a lot of the smaller agencies, it's really hard for them to keep their website updated because they don't have the staffing capacity, or if they did one year, they might lose some of that funding and they don't have it the next. And so the information isn't always up to date. So oftentimes as a result, and as service providers who really want to engage folks to come in and access resources to the fullest capacity, it's often most helpful to get clients just through the front door. So I think that's probably one reason why some agencies don't have a sign up online option, for example. If there are also kind of confidentiality and security issues around that. But there is definitely, I think, always a need for social media, specifically by folks in the community, and again, mostly to call attention to the fact that these agencies exist, and that, these agencies are serving a population that is really, really in need. So, I think there's always a capacity for more emphasis to go there, to focus on things like Hand Up and other resources that may be online that either folks who could use these resources don't know about, or people who just don't know that these things exist or don't understand the need. I think there's that kind of advocacy from the outside level that's really important. It's just about communication. I was talking to somebody at the Nest this past week at the ribbon cutting, and they were saying that they just had a conversation with somebody who was asking her, why would homeless folks need cell phones? And I think that's something that is a really common sentiment, and a lot of that just has to do, I think, with a basic orientation of people who aren't really maybe thinking so critically about what it's like to be homeless, or why would somebody end up in that position in the first place, and why isn't it easy to just get out of it, and just get a job, or whatever the challenge may be, or get a full-time job with a livable wage. So there, I think there's a lot of this is really just information. It's getting the information out there, and building an understanding about the situation as a whole and kind of the structural circumstances, and that level of communication will bring about social change. So I think the social media aspect is right on. And then how do you then get information about these places out? That's really a huge need.
Yeah. So instead of crowdfunding and crowd tweeting, can you gather a group of 100 people who are going to build awareness for an agency for a year?
Yeah.
Or more.
And then get them to go to City Hall.
Right. And advocate for affordable housing, because that's what we really need. That's one of the things. But it's at the top of the list because that's really once I.
Yes.
I sit here and, San Francisco has probably the largest amount of nonprofits in the United States per capita. This is a nonprofit city. And sometimes being in a nonprofit environment, we get to thinking profit because we're looking at numbers. And the reason why we're looking at numbers is because we got budgets, we got grant limits that we have to consider, and we start thinking only numbers, much like a profit company. And we can't get people tech proficient if we deal with numbers. How many people have we run through St. Anthony's in the years since we've been a tech center that are now in the tech community? Very close to zero. You can do things two different ways. You can spend 100% of your, or You can have 100 people come in St. Anthony or the Nest and give them, because your limitations, give them each 3% of your resources. At the end of the thing, you can have people that are 3% proficient. Or you can bring 3 people in there and give them 40% of your resources. Who do you think is going to be the better person to be tech proficient? We got to stop dealing with and trying to show our CEOs and our owners numbers. How many people did we serve? Oh, we served 600. How many people got in tech field? 0. We need to start slowing down a little bit and start finding people that are going to be able to make that transition and put all of our efforts on them, so we can actually get some people that are going to be able to compete in the tech industry. Because what we're doing now, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? What is the Nest going to really be able to do for those folks? Unless we get intense. We don't have the budget and the finances to get intense when we're bringing 40, 50 people in at a time. So we got to think, we got to think different. Quit thinking like a property company and showing, oh, we turned out 130 people this year. We don't need to do that. We need to show how many people 10 years from now that are now in Twitter, that are now in Spotify, that are now on Adobe. And as of now, we haven't done that. And we're just spending our wheels showing good numbers, but we're not doing anything.
And I think this speaks very deeply and directly to the importance of relationship with employers. So, I mean, and this is where I was talking about that clear pathways to employment, those have to come out. They have to be seen or shown. And that part of the answer to that question isn't just getting the 40% versus the 3% and the impact, but it's at the end, over the other side is, and where's the commitment to hire and then support? When I worked at Jewish Vocational Service, we had a guy who came in and out of a program. He was absent a lot. You know why? Because he was shot 12 times and he had to go back to multiple medical appointments to get those bullets removed, not all at once, but over a series of 3 appointments. That's real, and that's a barrier to being in a program, getting 12 bullets removed over a period of time. Sorry, I got all heavy, but
I think
Go ahead.
I think there are a lot of differing needs, and so I think at the end of the day, you know, as a nonprofit agency, we have to decide what the outcomes are going to be. Are the outcomes going to be that we provide basic needs support to 50 people, or try to get 3 people on the fast track to employment? One thing that I think, you know, community agencies can support with, again, is going back to getting information out there. So, like, there are really great programs specifically for, you know, high needs, low income individuals to get into the tech sector. Tech SF is a good example. It's a program through the Office of Economic and Workforce Development that we connect our clients to. We don't run that program ourselves, but if a client comes to us, we can then connect that client to that program. It will help them enter City College, go through training, and ideally come out connected to employment in the tech sector. One of the challenges there, and this is kind of a multi-step path for somebody, is that at the end, it's the actual connection with the tech companies that's been a real strain in recent years. That, in fact, as folks who I think some of us are engaged quite a bit in workforce development, that we can do a lot to help train and prep and connect people to some really great employment programs, because they do actually exist. But it's still that connection to the employer that often tends to be the real struggle. So perhaps if we saw more, I think, internal push from some of the companies to really focus more closely on hiring folks who've gone through, let's say, City College, like local schools, local programs, that would probably have a higher connection of people to really sustainable, ongoing, adequate, full-time employment. One of the biggest needs we see with our clients is oftentimes we'll have a family where both parents are working. They're, let's say, a family of 5 living in an SRO, living in a tiny room. Technically, in San Francisco, we consider that to be homeless. Severely inadequately housed at the very least. And let's say both parents are working. They're both working 27 hours a week at minimum wage. They're barely able to pay their rent, and they have 3 kids, and they have a hard time with dropping kids off, picking them up, finding the time to actually apply for different jobs. but getting people connected really through, through programs that can provide that direct connection to new employers and employers in the community is really enough that it would provide our job-ready clients, I think, with those opportunities that they really, really need. Because we do have a lot of, I think, really job-ready candidates who are just having a hard time finding that full-time work with livable wages, and something that's a pretty, clear-cut connection. Those are three of the top requested, job supports that our clients ask for.
Yeah, and I think, we're seeing that over the course of the last few years, nonprofits and foundations are really thinking about outcomes rather than outputs, and what, if someone gets housed, how long are they staying housed? Those are the real outcomes pieces. If someone gets a job, did they remain stable in that job? And so, I think we're seeing this trend of heading in the right direction of really focusing on the programs or the combination of programs that are working to move somebody into stability. But it's far from being there yet. There's a lot of intricacies in government funding and other things that are happening where a good nonprofit like Compass could actually put in a bid for services and then get underbid by another nonprofit who says we're going to serve 1,000 people with this money when they really wanted to responsibly serve 100 people. So there is still there needs to be some catch up in the funding community too to be able to serve people properly. But until then, I think it's important to note that the organizations that are providing even a light touch to somebody, and they are serving several people who are coming through the door, that may be the only human interaction that somebody who is homeless out in the streets receives during the day. And I don't think that we can discount, how much that means to a person and getting them, towards stability eventually, because every human touch counts.
Yes.
I'm wondering if your folks are finding income through programs like TaskRabbit or kind of micro tasks or any kind of where you're accessing the internet and doing the task online or finding employment that way, and not at a tech company that the bar is pretty high to get those kind of jobs.
If clients are accessing the internet just for regular job searches.
Well, job search, yes, but are they actually making income online through TaskRabbit or other types of programs that are meant to connect people to? And I don't know much about TaskRabbit and how difficult it is for folks to qualify and to actually do that work. So
We've actually seen a little bit of that. TaskRabbit has been used a little bit. Wonolo, I think, is another one that's come up recently among some of our clients that they were really interested in. Similar to TaskRabbit, I think, more for temp gigs. So you might go assist at a catering event to wash dishes for a night. What's another one? We have a lot of folks who will sign up for a childcare website. On-call childcare, nannying. At the end of the day, though, those all, again, require access to technology that a lot of our clients don't have consistently. So on the one hand, they don't have consistent access to those jobs, and unfortunately, those jobs oftentimes are, for your family specifically, if you're a parent or a single parent, you're maybe not often available to take on some of those jobs. They might be evening jobs oftentimes. They're very part-time. And at the end of the day, it's really hard to actually bring in an income that would make it kind of worth it to pursue that on a regular basis and then pay for whatever technology you might need to cover expenses for on your own to stay consistently on those sites and to be able to respond right away, rapidly. So unfortunately, it's not super accessible, a lot of this.
Just to chime in, I used to work at TaskRabbit, and I can say anecdotally, internally, we definitely had some emails circulate of homeless people using TaskRabbit for work. I don't know any numbers, it's just anecdotes that passed around, and it was definitely something the team was really excited about when it did happen, and we reached out to organizations that were involved with these individuals.
Yes, it would be worth pursuing further.
The task were to give
What-
everyone phones.
what kind of-
Everyone's phones.
What kind of funding is available or is being worked on to help people get on board to get the hardware so that they can do all this stuff?
So the funding for our program, we got an original piece of funding from Citibank who made the cash donation, and Google made a donation for phones. So the cash supports the project manager for that piece. So that's how we are funding that program. And some of the and we're looking at ways to be able to, sustain that, like in a like service for service, kind of like a Tom Shoe type of model, for folks moving forward to continue to get subsidies so that we don't have to rely on foundation money or corporate money moving forward. So that's what we try to do in a lot of our programming now. What our organization has been doing over the last few years is how we can provide some type of service that that people are willing to pay for to sustain that, rather than working in this volatile world of funding where sometimes it's 1 year you're in and the next year you're out. So it's difficult to maintain stable funding that way,
So that's
or
for
stable programming that
that's
way.
for your staffing.
So
Well,
this,
I was talking more. I was referring more to like the hardware equipment for people to actually use.
Mhm.
What's the difference? I mean, what's the use of training them and going to all these classes when they don't have anything to use when they need it?
well, I think what you've heard is that people
Are they given
going
equipment? Are they given equipment or?
Well,
anything?
in our case, they're getting a smartphone for free, so they get to keep it. They take it with them everywhere. So
But they have to pay for the subscription.
there's a service, and in some cases, individuals are paying for a discounted service themselves, and in some cases, we're working with a service provider who's paying for the service for their clients.
And do they have to choose between paying for the service or eating? Using the funds to pay for the service or to eat?
Potentially, I mean, that's low income populations and homeless are making choices like that every day. So the one part of our programming that we have is the safety net. So if someone can't afford, we're working with them on paying, providing the service in the continuity of that connection, which was talked about, very important. If you're looking for a job and your phone shuts off the next day, then you've lost the 5 or 10 opportunities that you applied for that weekend. So that's something that we don't want to do, and what we've been working during this programming to alleviate.
So is there grant funding to pay for that so that it's stabilized so that they don't have to worry about it being turned off?
No, you know what, I've been in the nonprofit community for 25 years, no. The answer's no.
I mean, our employees can barely afford to live in San Francisco, if at all, so.
Yeah, but I would say that this is where Hand Up can do some really great magic, because I believe that part of the structure of this whole thing is to put out there the need of an individual. So it's really truly, I need this thing for this particular job. I need a Mac because I want to do graphic design. I'm enrolled in Tech SF and I don't have a Mac or whatever. So if we can crowdsource, fund source, if we can raise money with the crowd for that thing, then please contribute. And then that can happen in that way. So really it's the community, it's this local society, or whoever is doing donations, getting the money to the person at that time when they need a very specific thing and to close that gap.
So you're saying there's no one willing to give a grant or to fund any of that? Is that what you're saying?
In general, no, because in general, the funders they're interested in getting to human service agencies, the money goes to the human services. So St. Anthony's, we give We have a social work center, we have a free clothing program, we have a medical clinic, we have the tech lab, and we have the dining room. And funders who give to St. Anthony's are not giving money to us with what we do to hand out computers. We have a tech lab, so people can get their tech lab needs met on a limited basis during our business hours, and that's a starting point.
And I would
It's a
say
starting point.
fundraising on hand up, people choosing to fundraise for laptops to cover their cell phone bill, to purchase a cell phone, a feature phone, to have that. That's what people are choosing to fundraise for because it's a flexible sort. It's a way that you can help someone get a cell phone, and then it doesn't go against other services that they're getting from local nonprofits.
The homeless emergency service providers, for the most part, are funded by the government, the state, the city, to provide the barest minimum of services. And even at that, the funding, honestly, it's simply inadequate. It's completely inadequate. That's why families right now are waiting 8 to 10 months just to get into a 3 to 6 month shelter stay. So when you have that level of need, unfortunately, while computers are really great, and our clients do need computers because they would, again, be able to better boost their level of skills, better boost their confidence in technology, engaging with the world in that way that will help them become more self-sufficient in the long term and more sustainably. The immediate need always comes first. It's like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have food on your table, if you are spending 4 hours a day just trying to figure out where you're going to sleep that night, a lot of those other things that would be, honestly, at a certain point kind of seem like luxuries are just, number one, less attainable, but also, the government in particular is less likely to fund those things. And a lot of private foundations often step in to assist with, again, just the really basic needs. So as I think kind of more emergency service providers, you're really focused on just the shelter, the things that really have to come first. And oftentimes, again, technology we find is a huge boost in one's ability to meet those needs, but without the food, you're not going to want to use your computer. You know what I mean? There's kind of this order that things need to go in, and there's this point at which technology really facilitates one's ability to meet those needs. But without the really most basic needs met, it's hard to get to that next step. So that's a big factor.
So isn't that kind of setting people up that you're training to fail if they don't have the equipment, the hardware to be able to do all these things?
No, I don't think so. At the end of the day, it's not that they're not using computers. It's that they might not have their own computer. Like, we can't give them a computer, but we can give them a place to come use a computer. At the very least, that enables them to do things on their own. And to give a really solid example, we have a lot of families that come to us for intensive case management. And when they come in, they might be in need of shelter. They might be sleeping literally on the floor of a church every night, where they have to show up at 3 p.m., wait in line, sleep on a mat on the floor, get up at 7 a.m. and leave with all of their belongings and all of their kids, drop the kids off at school. And what they really need to do is find childcare so then they can look for a job. They might have some really severe mental health needs. We have a lot of families with really severe intergenerational trauma. And so a family comes in, and what we can do is we can sit down with them to really assess, what are your needs? What are the most immediate needs? What can we put into a plan, an actionable and achievable and sustainable plan to make sure that we're able to step by step meet those needs, but also enable you with the skills to begin to meet those needs without any extra assistance. Having a computer lab, for example, means that a client does those things, and unfortunately, our funding base oftentimes just doesn't allow for that. Whatever additional funding we get in as donations, we're trying to figure out what client assistance is most important. Is it transportation? We have clients who are walking around with $700, unfortunately, in uni tickets because a mom with a stroller and 2 small children who is staying in shelter in Hunters Point and needs to come downtown to access services, can't get on the bus without getting a ticket. And so going back to kind of the most basic needs, food, shelter, transportation, whatever those might be, computers unfortunately comes down the line.
And I would distinguish between emergency needs, which is everything she's just described, and then the needs that you have to have met to successfully live.
And be self-sufficient.
And operate in society. So, and that's the distinction. That's, I think, a very important distinction.
And if I could add a really anecdotal, great, and it's kind of a plug for Hand Up. There's one family that I began working with about 1.5 years ago. A young mom, she grew up in foster care, going back to the intergenerational trauma thing, has experienced homelessness her entire life. She was young and pregnant, and she slept on the floor of our emergency shelter in San Francisco for 9 months. And we had such a backlog on the wait list for shelter and so much need. She got placed into an actual shelter 4 days before her child was born. There was last year only one permanent supportive housing building created in San Francisco. She was one of the lucky, needle in a haystack. She got selected and was offered housing in this apartment building. Before she got housed, we were able to connect her on Hand Up. We were able to get her transportation needs met, which helped her get her housing because she had to go to 10 million interviews, get all of her documentation, all of her paperwork together. We were able to get her a computer through Hand Up so that she had a laptop. This is 1.5 years later now because she's housed, because she has the computer, and also honestly because she's young and despite all of the hardships she grew up with, she's very tech savvy. She finished high school. She's got a very up-to-date understanding of computers and technology. She was able to get a really great job through the Keller Job Now program. She's now working. She now has her child in childcare, which is another huge barrier. She has a car, and meeting those basic needs enabled her to really get the computer, get the job, get everything that she needed to now really become self-sufficient, which she's doing famously. And if it hadn't been for that housing, I don't think she'd be where she is right now. The housing was really the #1 thing that made it.
Huge. Thank you for sharing that. I don't want to make you sit up here all night, but I'm sure you'll stick around for a little bit if other folks have questions. But let's hear a round of applause for the